In the summer of 1518, on a narrow cobbled street in the city of Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Trophäa started to dance. There was no music, no festival, just a frantic, twitching movement she couldn't seem to stop. This wasn't a party. Her face was a mask of distress. Her husband begged her to stop, but she was completely lost to the world. Her body a prisoner to some invisible rhythm. This wasn't performance, it was the beginning of a plague. Within a week, dozens of others had joined her, their bodies flailing in the same desperate, uncontrolled way. Within a month, as many as 400 people were caught in a dancing plague that would leave many of them dead from sheer exhaustion. This is the true and bizarre story of the dancing plague of 1518, an event so strange it sounds more like a dark fairy tale. But historical records, from physician notes to city council decrees, confirm this was terrifyingly real. So, what could possibly make hundreds of people dance themselves to death? It all started in mid-July. The city of Strasbourg, which was then part of the Holy Roman Empire, was suffering through a brutal summer. To make things worse, the years leading up to 1518 had been cruel. The region was gripped by famine, poverty, and disease, like smallpox and syphilis. It was a time of immense stress and deep, pervasive superstition. People looked for signs from God everywhere, and often they saw only omens of punishment. Into this tense atmosphere stepped Frau Trophäa. For nearly a full week, she danced alone. She danced from morning until night, collapsing from exhaustion only to get up after a brief, fitful rest and start her frantic movements all over again. Her feet became swollen and bloody, but she couldn't stop. At first, onlookers were probably bewildered, maybe even a little amused. But as the days wore on, curiosity surely turned to concern, and then to fear. Her dance wasn't joyful, it was a violent, convulsive fit. Her arms thrashed, her eyes were vacant, and she was drenched in sweat. People who saw it wrote that her movements were involuntary, as if she were a puppet pulled by unseen strings. She was the first, but she wouldn't be the last. A bizarre public ordeal was the spark that would soon ignite a city-wide firestorm mania. The dancing began to spread like a virus. First, a few onlookers started to mimic her movements. Then, more and more joined in. Within a week, over 30 people were afflicted. By August, that number had exploded to an estimated 400 citizens. The streets of Strasbourg, once filled with the sounds of merchants and daily life, were now the stage for a silent, horrifying spectacle. Men, women, and even some children were caught in the grip of this bizarre compulsion. They danced in public markets, in narrow alleys, and on town squares, their bodies jerking and twisting for days. They weren't a coordinated group, they were hundreds of individuals, each trapped in their own private torment, yet moving together in a grotesque collective trance. They danced through injuries, pain, and the desperate pleas of their loved ones. Some even cried out for help as their legs kept moving against their will. The city's authorities were completely baffled and seriously alarmed. The powerful guild leaders, the city council, and the clergy all gathered to figure out what on earth was happening to their citizens. This wasn't just a few people acting strangely. This was a public crisis, and it was spiraling out of control. They had to do something. The first decision, however, would turn out to be a catastrophic mistake. After consulting with local physicians, the city council ruled out astrological or supernatural causes. Instead, they landed on a popular medical theory of the time. The dancers were suffering from hot blood. This idea came from the theory of the four humours, which said good health depends on a balance of bodily fluids. The doctors figured the dancers had too much hot blood, and the only cure was to let the fever burn itself out. Their prescription was, and you're not going to believe this, more dancing. In a decision that seems almost insane today, the authorities decided to facilitate the plague. They cleared out guild halls to create dance floors and even had a wooden stage brought into the public market. To keep the energy up, they hired professional dancers to join the afflicted and paid for musicians to provide a constant driving beat. They genuinely believed that if people just danced continuously, day and night, they would eventually dance out the sickness. The result was a nightmare. The music and designated dance areas didn't cure anyone. They just encouraged more people to join the frenzy. The spectacle seemed to legitimise the mania, drawing more suggestible and stressed out citizens into the fold. The crisis hit its peak. The constant motion under the blistering summer sun began to take a fatal toll. Dancers collapsed from pure exhaustion, their bodies completely spent. Many suffered heart attacks, strokes, or broken bones. While contemporary city records don't give an exact number, some later sources claimed that at the height of this plague, as many as 15 people were dying each day. The stages meant to cure them had become their deathbeds. The well-intentioned but disastrous medical advice had turned a bizarre phenomenon into a deadly one. The city had, quite literally, danced itself sick. As the death toll mounted, and the more dancing cure was obviously failing, the panicked authorities did a complete 180. They issued a new decree. All public dancing and music were banned. The stages were torn down. The city that had just encouraged the mania now sought to crush it. Having failed with medicine, they turned to faith. The prevailing superstition at the time centred on a saint named Saint Vitus, who was believed to have the power to cure sinners with a dancing plague. The affliction was even known in some areas as Saint Vitus dance. The new plan was to appeal to the very saint they thought was responsible. The remaining dancers, many weak and delirious, were rounded up. They were put into wagons and taken on a pilgrimage to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus in the nearby hills of Saverne. There, they were led through a solemn religious ritual. Priests gave them small crosses and red shoes that had been sprinkled with holy water. As priests chanted, the dancers were made to circle a wooden carving of the saint. And then, slowly, mysteriously, the dancing stopped. Whether it was the power of the ritual, being removed from the charged atmosphere of the city, or just the fact that the mania had finally run its course, people began to recover. By early September, the dancing plague of 1518 was over. The city was left in shock, forced to grapple with the memory of the weeks when hundreds of their neighbours were consumed by a madness that even today defies an easy explanation. So what really happened in Strasbourg? For centuries, historians and scientists have tried to unravel this historical mystery. Today, there are three main theories. The first, and most widely accepted, is mass psychogenic illness, or what's more commonly known as mass hysteria. Just think about the context. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city under extreme stress. Famine, poverty, and deadly disease were everywhere. Historian John Waller argues this created a perfect storm for a collective stress response. In a society that deeply believed in supernatural curses, seeing Frau Trophäa's uncomfortable dancing could have been a powerful trigger. In this high-anxiety environment, the population's psychological distress exploded into a physical symptom, dancing, which then spread through social contagion. It was essentially a psychic epidemic, born from pure despair. The second popular theory is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a mold that grows on damp rye, the grain used for bread. This fungus produces chemicals similar to LSD, and eating it can cause a condition called ergotism. With symptoms like convulsions, muscle spasms, and hallucinations, this theory suggests the dancers had simply eaten contaminated bread. But this explanation has some big problems. While ergot can cause spasms, it usually cuts off blood flow and wouldn't give people the stamina to dance for days. Plus, the severe, painful muscle contractions would likely make any kind of coordinated dancing impossible. The symptoms just don't quite line up with the historical accounts. The third theory revolves around religious or ritualistic causes. Some have proposed the dancers were part of a heretical cult, but there's very little evidence of that. A more plausible idea is that the dancing was an extreme, unsanctioned form of religious penance. In an era where people believed their sins could cause physical sickness, the dancing might have been a desperate public attempt to atone, to dance away their sins and beg for divine mercy in a time of incredible suffering. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most baffling and unsettling events. No single theory perfectly explains how hundreds of people could be overtaken by such a self-destructive compulsion. Was it a psychological breakdown fueled by terror and despair? A mass poisoning from a toxic fungus? Or a warped expression of religious fervour? It was likely a complex cocktail of all these things. A population under immense stress, a shared set of superstitious beliefs, and a social environment ripe for contagion. The dancing plague is a haunting reminder of the powerful and sometimes terrifying link between the mind and the body. It shows how under the right pressures, our collective behaviour can spiral into something that defies all logic. More than 500 years later, the silent, frantic dance of Frau Trophäa and her followers still echoes throughout history. A mystery we're still trying to understand. What do you think caused the dancing plague? Was it mass hysteria, poison, or something else entirely? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you found this dive into a bizarre historical mystery fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more strange stories from the past.